The Young and the Restless recap Friday's full August 15, 2025. The storm that had been brewing in Genoa City was about to reach its peak. As tensions mounted, the lines between loyalty, ambition, and betrayal blurred in ways no one could have anticipated. The first clash to break the calm was between Nick Newman and Billy Abbott, two men whose paths had crossed more times than they cared to count, but never under such intense circumstances. Nick, already grappling with the lingering trauma of the failed murder attempt by Cain Ashby, couldn't understand why Billy, of all people, seemed to have forgiven Cain so easily. Nick's face twisted with disbelief as he stood in the middle of the conversation with Billy. His fists clenched, a mix of anger and frustration taking over him as he tried to keep his composure. After all that Cain had done, after the chaos he had caused, the almost fatal encounter between them, it felt almost impossible to understand why Billy could even consider trusting Cain. Nick had no doubt that the man who had nearly taken his life couldn't be trusted. And now, to see Billy, of all people, willing to brush aside the past to continue working with Cain? It was a betrayal he wasn't sure he could forgive. Billy, in his own way, had been struggling with this decision for some time. On one hand, he had always been the one to do what was right, to keep a steady head when things seemed chaotic. But Cain wasn't just any man, he was someone Billy had known for years, someone who had been part of the Abbott family. The fact that Cain had orchestrated Damien's murder attempt and the fallout in Nice still weighed heavily on him, but Billy believed in second chances. He had always been the one to see the potential in people, to believe that everyone could change, maybe even Cain. But the more Billy tried to defend his decision, the more Nick's fury grew. Nick wasn't blind to Billy's good intentions, but the scars from what Cain had done to him ran deep. They were both tied to the same world of power, manipulation, and revenge that seemed to govern every decision in Genoa City, but there was something different this time, something more personal. "You can't seriously trust him, Billy. He almost killed me. After everything we've been through, how could you just let that go?" Nick's voice was shaking with the weight of his words, the pain that had been festering for so long. Billy couldn't give Nick the full truth, though. The truth that he had been working from within, trying to bring Cain down from the inside, was too dangerous. He couldn't risk Nick knowing, not with the stakes this high. The plan was delicate. If it fell apart, everything would come crashing down, and Jabot, the one thing he held most dear, would be at risk. He had to stay the course, even if it meant facing Nick's wrath. Billy was determined to protect Jabot, no matter the personal cost, but would Cain be able to see through his facade? Was Billy really playing both sides, or was he walking a fine line he couldn't step off of? Meanwhile, as Billy struggled with his decisions, Victor Newman was lurking in the shadows, calculating his next move. The burning desire for revenge had consumed him since he learned of Cain's involvement in the chaos in Nice. Cain had gone too far, and in Victor's world, there were no second chances for traitors. It didn't matter that Cain had once been a loyal ally, he had become a liability. Victor's vengeance would be swift, and it would be ruthless. Victor's plan was clear, he would offer Cain an ultimatum. Join him in taking down the Abbott family and securing dominance over Genoa City, or face the consequences of his betrayal. Cain, however, wasn't one to be easily controlled. He rejected Victor's offer outright, a decision that would prove to be his undoing. He had his own ambitions, his own plans for Genoa, and he would not allow Victor to manipulate him into another corner. What followed was a series of calculated moves, each more dangerous than the last. Victor, never one to back down from a fight, knew that Cain's refusal would only escalate the tension. The stakes were higher than ever before. What was supposed to be a corporate takeover war, what should have been a battle of business minds, was now turning into an all-out war for survival. Victor's anger, mixed with Cain's own defiance, was a powder keg ready to explode, and Genoa City was about to feel the full force of their conflict. The city, which had once been a haven for power players like Victor and Cain, would soon become the battlefield where they fought for control. The Abbott family, ever at the center of this storm, found themselves caught in the middle of a battle that would change everything. The war was not just about business, it was about pride, revenge, and survival. And in this game, only one man could come out on top. But as Cain and Victor prepared for their inevitable clash, there were other forces at work. The people closest to them, Billy, Nick, and Lily, were all entangled in this web of lies and deception. And the damage they would cause by the time everything came to light could be far worse than any of them could have anticipated. In the end, the question would remain, who would come out victorious in this war, and at what cost? Victor Newman was not the type of man to let his enemies go unpunished, especially when they had crossed him in the way Cain Ashby had. After everything Cain had done to disrupt his plans in Nice, and the betrayal that had led to such a chaotic downfall, Victor was resolved to make Cain pay. He wasn't about to let Cain waltz back into Genoa City unscathed. This time, the stakes were higher, and Victor wasn't about to let Cain slip through his fingers, no matter what it took. Victor knew that Cain, with his overconfidence and belief that he was untouchable, would underestimate the power of his enemies. Cain had a way of thinking that, as Victor saw it, was almost comical. He truly believed he could weather any storm, even one stirred up by the formidable Victor Newman. Cain's bravado was nothing short of absurd, especially given the magnitude of the web of enemies he had spun around himself. Cain thought he was made of kryptonite, unbreakable, invulnerable. But Victor had other plans. Cain's delusion of invincibility would soon be shattered. Victor's plan to neutralize Cain was ruthless. He knew how to play the game, and he wasn't about to let personal feelings get in the way of business. Cain's refusal to collaborate with him had only fueled Victor's resolve to make him regret ever returning to Genoa City. A man like Cain, one who dared to reject Victor's offer and challenge his authority, needed to be shown that in this world, you didn't turn your back on Victor Newman and get away with it. Meanwhile, at Jabot, Jack Abbott found himself in the midst of a battle he never saw coming. He had always been a savvy businessman, but the situation with Cain and Billy was testing his every limit. Jack had recently discovered the plot Billy had set in motion to bring down Cain from within. Jack, ever the strategist, understood the game Billy was playing, but he also knew Billy's tendencies. Billy's impulsiveness and penchant for vengeance often led him to make decisions that weren't always in the best interest of the family. Jack knew that Billy's emotions could cloud his judgment, especially when it came to personal vendettas, and he feared that Billy's thirst for revenge against Cain could endanger more than just their corporate empire, it could tear the family apart. Jack's own motives were clear. He wanted Cain out of the picture, but he didn't trust Billy's ability to execute a well-thought-out plan. Billy's tendency to get distracted by his own emotions had caused problems in the past, and Jack wasn't convinced that Billy had the cold, calculated approach necessary to pull this off. That being said, Jack was willing to give him a chance. He hoped Billy could carry out the coup that would rid them of Cain, but he also feared what might happen if Billy failed. And just when things seemed to be reaching a boiling point, Jack received an unexpected invitation. The message was clear. Cain wanted to speak with him about business, perhaps even about collaborating against Victor. Jack's mind raced. What was Cain really up to? Could he be looking for an ally in his ongoing battle against Victor? It was a dangerous proposition, and Jack wasn't sure he could trust Cain. His reputation alone was enough to make anyone cautious. But at the same time, Jack couldn't ignore the possibility of an alliance that could benefit him in the long run. The stakes were high, and Jack knew this conversation could change everything. However, there was one rule Jack had to adhere to: he could not, under any circumstances, reveal Billy's intentions to Cain. Jack was already walking a fine line, and spilling secrets could jeopardize everything. The situation was delicate. Jack had to navigate this conversation with Cain carefully, avoiding any slip-ups that might reveal Billy's plot to undermine him. Could Jack make it through this conversation without betraying his family's trust? Could he find a way to come out of this situation unscathed while protecting Billy's secret? As the tension mounted, the city of Genoa was on the brink of a corporate war. Cain, ever determined, was not backing down. He had been underestimated before, but this time, he was going all in. His ambition was unrivaled, and he would stop at nothing to take control of Genoa City. Whether it was through manipulation, alliances, or sheer force, Cain was ready to make his move. The question that lingered in the air, though, was whether he could succeed in his quest for power, or whether the forces against him, Victor, Billy, Jack, would be too much for him to overcome. The drama unfolding in Genoa City was far from over. Fans of the young and the restless were left on the edge of their seats, eagerly watching as Cain and his adversaries geared up for what promised to be the ultimate showdown. Would Cain's relentless drive and ambition be enough to outsmart Victor and Billy, or would the power struggles of Genoa City finally break him? As the story unfolded, one thing was clear: Cain's battle for control was far from over, and the consequences of his actions would ripple through the city for months to come. So, what do you think, WNR fans? Does Cain have what it takes to take control of Genoa City? Or will the forces of Victor and Billy be too much for him to handle? The answer lies just around the corner.